Here we are. I am back stateside, and it is time for another edition of the RotoWire Rundown. My name's Keith Stewart from Read the Line, and I am joined, of course, by the one, the only, the award-winning scribe from RotoWire, senior golf editor, Mr. Len Hochberg. Len, I made it back through customs. All was good up north. The U.S. brought the President's Cup back home to American soil. They took care of business up there north of the border. Give me your last impression of the 2024 President's Cup. What'd you think of the whole event?
Bonjour to you, Keith. Welcome back. You were the one who was there. I certainly want to get your thoughts on it. We had a ball game for 2.5 days or so. We didn't, which is more than a lot of people would have expected. But there were some curious decisions by Mike Weir. He seemed to lean very heavily on his countrymen. Connors played 5, and Pendrith played 5, and some other guys, I don't know. Minwoo Lee played Thursday. We didn't see him again until Sunday. So I think Mike Weir will be having some backlash at him, but he didn't have. I don't think it would have mattered. Sung Jae Im getting 1 point. He's one of your key guys. Didn't show up. Tom Kim, I'd like to hear your thoughts on Tom Kim after I just say what I say here. It just seemed like he was talking the talk more than walking the walk. He had 1.5 points. He, was very boisterous and everything. He looked every bit as a 22-year-old in a big time golf tournament, and, settle down and play some golf. So, my takeaway more, is just what the international side I've been talking about, because everything the Americans they were just better, and they did what they were supposed to do.
There's a little bit to unpack there, and much like coming back from a trip, Tom Kim showed his age in so many ways, and there's good and bad in that. There's some great in that the international team desperately needs an identity. That they're coming from all over the world, and a lot of people forget this, but for years, the Ryder Cup was just Great Britain and Ireland. And then when they added Europe, there were some growing pains there in the 70s. And eventually they added that talent from Europe, and that helped them dramatically start to challenge the U.S. side and put together a strong enough squad that eventually won in the 80s. But 22 of the first 25 Ryder Cups were won by the U.S. So, I'm not really against the internationals not winning. I would have loved to have been more competitive, but they need a Sevy. They need a guy. And if Tom Kim at 22 is willing to take on that role of not necessarily the enemy, but more so their emotional leader, all the power to him. That's an undertaking. You don't see Scotty Scheffler walking through that door saying, like, I'm going to be the rebel rouser of the U.S. side, right? In many ways, it's good for their team. And it's bad for their team that he's just not winning points. Right. So it's great to yell and scream, but when he goes back in the team room, the other guys have to be like, well, geez, if you're going to yell and scream, we need you to get more than 1 point. We need you to get, we need you to get, his record. He had a losing record in Charlotte. He's got a losing record here now in Montreal. So, people may not like him, but Patrick Cantley in 14 matches is 15-6-1. So, forget Patrick Reed as Captain America. Patrick Cantley is Steve Rogers. He is the man. That guy, he just takes care of business. They were calling him in the media room, they were calling him an assassin. And in many ways, he's a trained killer when it comes to those team events. But overall, the event, I thought it was interesting that the crowd was really subdued on a Thursday. They got called out by like Taylor Pendrith in the media room. The quietest Canadian of them all was like, hey, you guys need to show up for us. We know it's 5-0, but the crowd didn't help us at all. They came out on Friday, Saturday, and they were there on Sunday, but Sunday got so red so early, there really wasn't much they could do. But certainly Friday and Saturday, the crowds were great. The golf course was magnificent. A lot of people were complaining it was too vanilla. The back nine was just absolutely, in my mind, electric for match play. It's not so much that the last 5 holes had water on them, but it was more that the setup of the back nine, every hole was on top of one another. And that made it very cool to be able to watch, when the matches came through from different perspectives and you could see more than one match happening at a time and what transpired. Mike Weir, yes. I mean, he certainly deserves some criticism, but it takes a village. I mean, Jeff Ogilvy had a lot of input. Ernie Els had a lot of input. Trevor Immelman had a lot of input. So I would just say the captains of the international side, the vice captains and the captain, Mike Weir, certainly have a little bit to blame because Saturday seemed very reactionary when they came in on Thursday and Friday and they were like, we have a plan. We're sticking to the plan. This is the plan. And so when they got to Saturday and everyone was like, oh, hey, the Kims, we're going to play the Kims from now till like they're dead, like for the next 40 years, that to me was like, not managing maybe fatigue and a couple other things. So overall, I would give the event an A. I wouldn't run to try to change a bunch of things. It doesn't necessarily need to be a mixed event. The men don't need it to be a mixed event. The LPGA would desperately love it to be a mixed event. Don't get me wrong. But I think what it really comes down to is at the core on the U.S. side, the big four, Colin, Scotty, Patrick, and Xander, they earned 15 points. So they almost brought the cup back within a half point, Len. Like they got the job done up there. And the international side, their big four did not. Adam, Sungjae, Tom Kim, and Hideki, they did not play as well when they went against the big guns. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to. And somebody asked me this last week, and I thought it was a really good point. The international side is building a shield, right? That's their logo. Ernie started that about 10 years ago. The black and gold, the color story, the chanting INT. I don't know if I love it, but it's tough to go against USA, like as far as an acronym to scream. But I would, in closing, I would throw about my reaction to this and being there. I would throw it back to you. Had they won the President's Cup this year, Len, where would they put the trophy?
Huh. Yeah. They could have shared it like the Stanley Cup. Everybody gets the Stanley Cup for a week during the off season or something like that. Yeah. They do need to, maybe it is a matter of time. And, with so many sporting events, maybe not, this ended up kind of a blowout, but as tournaments, games, whatever, they're won on one or two key moments, critical plays certainly in an 18-hole match. It could flip on a couple of shots. These things are a lot closer. Objects are closer than they appear, type of thing. 18 and a half and 11 was 8.5, 11 and a half. That's pretty big blowout, but that's 3 matches, right? 4 matches out of 30 going the other way, which maybe in those 4 matches, maybe there's 10 shots that flipped those matches. So, I think Weir could have done another thing about Weir sending Jason Day out number 1 on Sunday, must win match. I mean, granted, you're going against Xander. It's going to be tough, but you got to throw one of your big four, as you call them, out there. And even if they weren't delivering, you got to hope they deliver because Jason Day is kind of washed at this point. He'll be a captain one day. Next time in Australia, that should be Adam Scott. The time after that should be Jason Day. But I don't see any changes either. I don't think there should be any changes. I think the format is good, and the internationals will get there at some point.
Totally agree. And but we mentioned a lot of names. So one of the things I'm always curious about is that when I look back to Whistling Straits in 2021, when Scotty took down John Rahm at the time, he was the number 1 player in the world. That seemed to kind of like launch him a little bit in confidence, right? And of course, he gets his first win there in a playoff over Cantlay at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. The next, probably February that was, February or March, whenever that event fell back then. That was a big deal. I'm wondering who you think, because you're always building out these lineup cards, and there was 12 guys, there's 24 guys up there. And we know that Scotty is where he is and Xander is where he is in his career. Certainly Hideki and some others, but was there anyone up there on the international side or the American side that you think had a really good week and now your expectations of them, not necessarily for the fall, because most of those guys don't have to really compete in the fall. But when it comes to 2025, are you expecting more out of maybe one or two players that you saw participate this past week in Montreal?
I don't know if I do. I don't know if there's any one of the 24. I mean, the internationals, there's not much they can hang their hats on. There's not anyone who overperformed and should, will be, he's the shining star of future international teams. As you mentioned so perfectly, the American team was dominated by four guys who are already four of the top 10, maybe top 10 players in the world. So I don't know if anyone really got a launch. Maybe Sahith Theegala, who you got to experience being around in this setup and will be presumably on future Cup teams, Ryder Cup, President's Cup. And now he's already won a couple of times, but maybe he feels even more part of the group and more part of the tour. And Russell Henley, who's never been a part of these either. Yeah. He's not a young guy, doesn't have that many years left, but he's always had trouble closing. And, it seems like he should have won more than he has the last couple of years. And playing alongside Scotty Scheffler, that's got to be an incredible boost and that an incredible honor for him. That was a bit of a surprise, that Henley was playing with Scheffler, but it worked maybe because you could put a cardboard box with Scotty Scheffler and it would work. But maybe Henley, maybe Theegala. I mean, Harman and Homa did nothing to get out of their funk. Homa won his match. So Henley and Theegala, maybe that's it for me. You?
I'm going to go good news, bad news, right? So I'll start. Which one do you want first?
Let's get the bad news out of the way.
All right. So Patrick Cantlay, and, I alluded to this earlier, 15-6-1 in 4 of these team matches, 2 President's Cup, 2 Ryder Cups. This guy gets the job done, and that's under immense pressure. No major championships. So for me, coming out of this in 2025, if he can't pull down one of those 4 trophies based upon what he's continued to do, proving himself twice now on the road, right? Rome and then into Montreal. And this guy got the job done big time. You could say Max Homa was the MVP of that team in Rome, but that's just not true. I mean, it was Cantlay. He took on that European side and he played the best of the best players. So from a bad news point of view, it's like, the way it kind of launched Scotty, man, this thing has certainly put Patrick, who's not necessarily beloved on tour, on a pedestal. And I hope he can cash in on one of these major championships because he's definitely one of the 5 most talented players on tour. But man, he hasn't really shown up in majors to date. So I'm interested to see where that path leads. And then the second one, the good news is Keegan Bradley. And I say that selfishly as a PGA of America member. I was so happy when they broke, the family tree of Davis Love going through these captaincies of the Ryder Cup. Things need to change, right? It's like, it was just like too much incest. And as a result, like the kids just weren't operating. You know what I mean? Like, it's just no good, right? And when they drew a line in the sand and they put Keegan Bradley there, I think that was a phenomenal move by them. And as such, Keegan still wasn't completely part of the boys club. We all know that. And maybe that led to him being there. And maybe that made it easier on the PGA America to say, well, if he needs to make tough decisions, he's not really friends with these guys. Well, him earning his way onto that team. I talk about Cantlay so affectionately. I mean, Keegan's won like one time at least each of the last 3 years. Cantlay hasn't. So Keegan earned the right to get in that team, win with that team, get the winning point. And now I think that's really going to elevate his relationships with these guys going into what he needs to do for Bethpage Black. People will make a lot of stories about like whether or not he should play on that team or whatever. Well, if he earns it, he earns it. So be it. I'm not going down that road, but I think the great news for the American side is that this guy now has a huge attachment to that core 4, and he has the ability to go out and get Brooks and Bryson if he wants, because the PGA of America said he could do that. So that's my good news, bad news situation, walking away from the President's Cup. Thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree. Cantlay, not just not getting it done. Some guys are built for different type tournaments, and
True.
I mean, unfortunately for Cantlay, he's all these golfers, they're always measured by what they do in the majors. They could be, I mean, Colin Montgomery, what great Ryder Cup player, never won a major, and that's all people think of. Never won a major.
Yeah.
That's what the first thing is going to be. But Keegan Bradley, really, it was very beneficial to Keegan Bradley that he got to be part of this team, and he wasn't an integral part of it. It just was poetic justice, the golf gods, that it fell on him to clinch. It could have been anybody. It wasn't like he did anything except being in the right place at the right time. But it all will help him in Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black in less than 12 months now. So yeah, and it'd be better if he doesn't play.
I got to tell you a quick cool story. So I'm standing next to the 16th green, and Keegan's there in his match there with Siwoo, and Cantlay is across the pond over on 17 green, and we need 2 points to clinch the cup. And they both sets of matches, the singles matches, are putting. And I'm looking at this, I go, man, what a great storyline it would be for everyone to tell that the next Ryder Cup captain, takes the winning point. So Keegan he's 3 up against Siwoo. He's got about a 3-foot putt in order to win his match because they're going to tie the hole, and then that match will be over. And Patrick's being Patrick over on 17, and they're not moving as quickly, and Patrick wasn't putting first. So it was like, as this was taking place, I was like, well, at the rate this is going, Patrick's now going to clinch it, right? So what happens is that Keegan misses that short putt because he goes first, and I'm like, oh man. And then Patrick wins this hole because he's on the hole in front of him. He's got to get out of the way. Now Keegan ends up tying, or moving the match all the way to 18, which was very cool as far as the storyline goes. But there was a moment there where Patrick could have been the one who had the winning point, and as the golf gods worked it out or whatever, and Keegan missed that short putt, everyone was kind of like, oh, and Keegan looked really bummed out, but I don't think he was that bummed out overall when the whole thing came together, and he eventually had the winning point.
Yeah, well, they were going to win anyway, so yeah. What's a little bit of a hole later or whatever? Yeah, it was a better ending with Keegan getting the icing on the cake more than Patrick, the bubbly Patrick Cantlay.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, enough on the PC. Patrick Cantlay or President's Cup for that matter. Let's move on to the Chicken Championship, right? So since 2014, we've been going to the Country Club of Jackson down there in Jackson, Mississippi, 45-hole facility, champion Bermuda grass greens, one of those places where we have quite an eclectic group of fall champions over the last decade here on the property. We're going to use the Dogwood and the Azalea 9. And as you look at this golf course and you break it down, and I don't need any hype. I don't need any extra hyperbole. What I do need to know, though, is what kind of skills does it take when in back-to-back years you have like Cam Champ winning and Sebastian Munoz, or Ryan Armour and Cam Champ? I mean, tell me a story about, the Country Club of Jackson and how you're built, and what kind of skill sets or player characteristics you're looking for in this field of 132 this week down there in Mississippi.
The numbers say that putting is very, very important this week, that you have to putt great to win, but you didn't name many great putters there. And I don't think last year's champion Luke List will be changing that narrative. Mackenzie Hughes, who's won here, and Sam Burns has won here, are great putters, or potentially great putters. So, but you do have to putt great to win here. We see that. There's not a lot of danger off the tee. It's not an especially long course. The rough isn't especially penal. I think if you can hit it far, you're in good shape. As long as you don't miss by zip codes, you can miss by a little and not be in terrible shape. I think we got a lot of approach shots, short approach shots, 125 to 150. I think it might be a key number, even more than 150 to 175 this week. A lot of shorter par fours. So guys who can play those holes well. One of the interesting things about this tournament, first of all, it's probably the biggest professional sporting event in Mississippi every year. I mean, they have college
Yeah.
football and huge. But
Yeah.
pro sports in Mississippi, not much. So, but this is challenging because guys have not played in a while. Some guys have not played since the Wyndham. Some guys have not played since the playoffs, the BMW or the FedEx. I mean, some of the guys, a lot of the guys have played the Pro Tour, but that's even 3 weeks ago. So it's really challenging from that, standpoint to try and guesstimate, figure out who's going to play well after such a long layoff. But I think just overall, it's a second shot golf course. You got to make putts. Maybe that's oversimplifying it.
Actually, I don't think it is at all, Len. I think that, you're going to get 40% of your approach shots from 100 to 150 yards. So the average winning score here has been about 19 under par over the last decade. Those wedge shots have to be close, and you've got to be able to putt Bermuda grass greens. I mean, Luke List, you talk about the one of the most unique ironies in all of life. Last year he gained 6 on the greens and he barely gained anywhere else. And he won that 5-way playoff on Sunday in order to take home his second career title. So I really do think it comes down to really, really good wedge play. And then obviously putting these Bermuda grass greens that 8 of the last 10 have gained 3 strokes or more on the field with their flat stick. So I'm going to keep it right there. And I'm going to bump right over to the names because I think if you start to read into the Country Club of Jackson, you're missing the point of the FedEx Cup fall, So 10K land. We have one player of the 24. I think if I did the math right there, or my research is correct. Mac Hughes came down from Montreal. Now he won it 2 years ago, so you see why he's there. A couple other guys in the 10K land. Obviously, this field is not the strongest. Scary thing is people are complaining about the strength of this field, and we haven't gotten to Bermuda yet. So, boy, I tell you, could be some dark days ahead. But that being said, for this week, 10K land, Mac Hughes, emotional letdown, or are you featuring a different guy? Who do you have up here at the top of the board?
None of them. There's only 3. Keith Mitchell is the top guy. I was really surprised to see Keith Mitchell as the number 1 guy on the DraftKings board. I don't quite get it. Certainly not the best putter, and got to find. We talked about some guys who aren't great putters winning here, but go ahead and predict bad putters who putt well this week. Not going to like Keith Mitchell. Seamus Power, number 2, also in the 10 guys, has had only 1 top 10 all year. He's had a very solid, mediocre year, but only 1 top 10. I'm not picking him to win a tournament. I'm not thinking he's going to do it. And Mackenzie Hughes, maybe he'll play well. Maybe he's gotten the President's Cup out of his system already. I would hope not. I would think that being in Canada for the President's Cup would be a bigger deal and would take a little longer to overcome. But I don't know. And so many different options in this tournament. We see longer shots coming in. Even when Sam Burns won, he wasn't Sam Burns. So it wasn't like some top guy won the tournament. And Brandt Snedeker also here, by the way, came down from Royal Montreal. And will be here. Not that he's in my mix. So I'm more into the 9s. I'm starting to load up in the 9,000s.
All right. Well, you mentioned Sam Burns, and they always nickname him Sam Bermuda Burns, right? But there's a guy in the 9K range that he's got a B in his name too, and that's Ben Bermuda Griffin. This guy putts Bermuda greens well. Is he featured at the top of the table for you, or is there somebody else in the 9K land that you like?
Well, he's one of them. Yeah, he was second here last year, tied for second. He was in the playoff. He's had a couple of close calls, and he's, circling the winner's circle or something like that. And one of the things that, it makes it hard to pick a winner, and we're not exactly picking a winner here, is guys who can win. Talked earlier about Russell Henley, maybe not closing out some tournaments he could have, should have in the past, and maybe this experience at the President's Cup will. Well, one guy who I think is a clear best golfer in this field has shown in a very short time he can close out tournaments, and that's Nick Dunlop. And I was very surprised when I saw the field. Yes, he's the highest ranked guy, the only guy in the top 50 in this field. But I'm surprised there are at least 4 guys over him on the DraftKings board. So I think he has shown he can win, and he's not too far from Alabama here this week, so he might have some local support as well. JJ Spawn, just under 10,000 at 99, playing very well since June, really turned around his season. And at the bottom of the nines, Patrick Fishburne, who's was probably not known by many people 3 months ago, has had a very strong last month or two. He was third at the Pro Tour and had a couple of other top 6 finishes in his last 4 starts. So, nothing in the 10s, 4 guys I point to in the 9s.
Let's move down to the 8s. There's 2 names there that we've said many times before, and if we were doing this show 10 years ago, we might have been saying those names more, and that's Harris English and Matt Kuchar. Matt Kuchar's been playing great. Harris English has been known to be a very good fall contender. Do those guys highlight your 8 list, or who do you like in the 8K land?
Harris English is a big fantasy football player. I heard him on the Sirius XM Fantasy Channel. He was interviewed. He's very serious about it, knows his NFL. So I was very impressed to see that as a fantasy football player / golf, whatever I am in golf. But he's not on my list. Matt Kuchar had a good week last week, and he's safely inside the top 125. I don't think there's any worry there. But these guys they want to get at least this in the fall to get from 51 to 60 to get into those 2 signature events, Pebble Beach and Riviera. So I do like Matt Kuchar this week. Is what I always say about Matt Kuchar. He's 45, 46 years old, does not have putting yips. He's still one of the best putters, a top 20 putter on tour. We need to be a good putter this week. Chan Kim, was surprised to see him so high at 8,900, but looking at it closely, it seems like a fair price. He's been playing pretty well lately. Again, like a lot, Patrick Fishburne, I'm guessing a lot of people don't know who he is. And guys we've talked about here before, even though Mac Meisner did not have a great week at the Pro Tour, you can't just throw him out because he had one bad week. I think he fits this course well. And Rico Hoey, another guy who's played very well the last few months.
All right, so after the 8K land, on a week like this with a field like this, we're going down to 7K. I mean, we're heading down some dark places, but this is where the rubber meets the road, especially when it comes to DFS strategy, or in my world, trying to find a long shot that can win this thing. So, unfortunately, there's a big name down here, Ricky Fowler. Do you have any faith in Fowler? Or down here in the 7,000s, who do you like, Len?
I don't have any faith in him to play this week. He hasn't played since the Open Championship. He's been idle longer than anyone. He missed the playoffs, didn't play the Wyndham, so he couldn't even get into the playoffs. But he was just having he and his wife were having their second child right around then in August. So he's got bigger things on his mind than that. So he is back now, and it's a great get for the Sanderson Farms. I mean, it's still a big deal. He's still the biggest name in the field, I think. And if he were, in the mix on Sunday, he'd get some eyeballs off the NFL. I don't know if anybody else could do that. So it would be great for the tournament if he could be there. I don't have much faith in that. Some probably popular names down here. Andrew Novak. Andrew Novak is 19th on tour in strokes gained approach and 20th in strokes gained total. 20th in total. I don't know how he missed the playoffs, but he did. And he's really, I don't know, one of those guys who maybe plays better than he scores, it seems. But I like him. CT Pan's had a number of good years here in a row. Seems like a good golf course for him. And Henrik Norlander, this is his Super Bowl. He's had top 5s 3 of the past 4 years, including part of that 5-man playoff last year. So whatever it is, he putts great here. And that's what we like.
All right. One more category. We got to go down to the 6,000s. And believe it or not, there's a current PGA Tour winner that's in 6K land. And he's also won this event in 2015. And I'm talking about Peter Malnati. I mean, this guy won the Valspar this year. He's won here before, and he's in the 6K. Does that put him anywhere on your radar for 6,000s? Or down here, who are you going to dig up in 6K range?
Yeah, you almost make me feel bad that I didn't pick him because he certainly could here. He's certainly a great putter. And, he's not going to be hurt like so many guys are on super long courses that just sort of shut them out even before they hit their first shot. So, it would not surprise me if he were there. He looks good holding up the chicken trophy, all that. So that would be a natural thing. Chad Ramey, Mississippi native, was 16th here last year. A lot of guys go to their home tournament or whatever you want to call it and crumble and don't play well in front of family and friends. He did okay last year. And, the Sanderson Farm makes a big deal of the Mississippians coming back. Davis Riley, another one. Sam Ryder, just a terrific iron player, just did not have a good year this year, but he's made 3 cuts in a row at the Sanderson Farms. This is really slim pickings here for me. And lastly, because I always like to get 1,6,500 or under, Troy Merritt. He hasn't played this tournament a lot, but he came back last year and tied for 9th. And because he did that, he goes, well, maybe I should get my butt back here 2 years in a row and try it again. So we'll see how Troy Merritt does. I'm looking for him to make the cut.
Finish the week healthy, right? Oh man,
don't miss his plane.
Yeah, the bar is low. Oh man, I tell you, it's well, you know what? You and I, this is where we have the most fun. I mean, it's easy to go down to Magnolia Lane and just say, "Hey, I like John Rahm or I like Scotty Scheffler." Come to the Chicken Championship and go down to 6K and DFS and be able to spell most of the names, let alone know who they are. I tell you. Transitioning over to the betting board, there's 2 names here. They both are playing very well. Both guys are seasoned veterans on the PGA Tour. And one of the things that I did this week is I looked at the venues in the fall. 7 of the 8 venues this year were the same venues as last year, right? And many of those, I think 5 of the 8 have been the same for many, many years. So I went back and I looked at strokes gained in the fall for a lot of these, middle tier guys. And it turns out that there's a group of guys that play these fall courses very, very well. They're here every fall and they're playing in them and they seem to be very comfortable playing in them. They're skill set matches. And 2 of the guys that I'm betting are 2 of those guys that popped up on that list for me in my research. The first one at plus 3,300 is JJ Spawn. Now you're right. He's been playing very, very good. He's a tale of 2 seasons after the US Open. JJ has played incredible. Over his last 5 events, he's gaining almost 7 strokes total against the field. 5 of his last 6 results were in the, almost in the top 25. They're in the top. He had 1 top 26. And in this field, I know it's not great, but you still have to be good in the field in order to win. And he's top 10 in approach, in birdie or better. He's in bogey avoidance. And his putter has been very, very good in many of the events that he's played recently. He was great at the Wyndham. That again is also champion Bermuda grass. So I'm not worried. I think he's good on Bermuda grass. I think JJ Spawn on approach is he's one of the best players in this field. And I think unlike a guy like Kashmir Keith Mitchell, JJ could win this thing, right? Because he has been putting and he can chip well enough to do it. The second guy is plus 6,600, sitting in the middle of the pack. And Charlie Hoffman has had a good little season for himself. Now, if you think back all the way back to the WM Phoenix Open, right? He lost to Nick Taylor in a playoff and everyone felt bad for him. But Charlie, he kept playing good all season. And this is a golf course where he has played well before. He's top 20 in this field for putting and off the tee. That's the recipe you need. He's top 5 in the field for approach. So here's a guy that definitely he's won a couple times on tour, right? Half of those wins happened in the fall. So, I look to Charlie Hoffman to be a guy this week that if he does get in contention, like we've seen over the last couple of years, like a Mac Hughes, like Luke List, these guys that have been around that once they get near the top of the leaderboard, they're going to be less nervous than the Ben Griffins of the world. And they might just be able to pull one out. But those are the 2 guys that I'm looking at. I mean, hey, I'm not the only one thinking this. Charlie Hoffman was 66-1 on Monday, and that number is dropping incredibly fast. I guarantee it's down in the 50s as we're doing this show right now, and it'll be going even quicker. And after you and I publish this, it's going to drop even more because they know that you and I are on Charlie Hoffman without a doubt. So reactions to either one of those 2.
Yeah, I obviously I like Spawn. I have him on my list as well. That's kind of an easier call. I mean, he's one of the higher priced guys in the field. I think you had to do your homework to get to Charlie Hoffman. I did not know quite all that about Charlie Hoffman, although I do remember back waste management spokesman. So it was good that he showed out at Phoenix, but he's still got a lot of golf in him. It's just not every week, but he certainly has the game and the skill set to do well here. And like you said, if he gets in the mix, he's not going to crumble. He's been there. He can, he can certainly handle the pressure.
Well, Charlie can drive the ball great. He can clean up on Bermuda grass greens. So as a waste management spokesman, cleaning up is a good thing, right? So let me clean up this show real quick before we start telling any more jokes. All right. Next week, we got something exciting, though. We have the Black Desert Championship. We're heading to Utah for a brand new event. That's the one event this year that's not the same as last year. So kudos to the PGA Tour. So reinventing themselves once over the course of these 3 months. You and I will be back with the rundown. We'll have a lot of work to do between now and then to figure out the golf course, the field, the venue, and everything else. But in the meantime, Len Hochberg, any last words before the Chicken Championship?
I'm picking Tony Finau next week.
Oh, in his home state of Utah.
I'm guessing he has to be there, right? He has to play in that tournament.
I would say that.
I don't know if he is.
I would say that's a very educated guess right there. Your hypothesis does have some grounds with which to stand on. And this much I know, whether he's in the field or not, we will be back in 1 week's time at the same time for the RotoWire Rundown. On behalf of the award-winning scribe from RotoWire, my good friend Len Hochberg, I'm Keith Stewart from Read the Line. We'll see you in a week.